they leave those little notes on the counter, and your life isn't your own.
No, it's not.
You're a vampire,
And that's a good place to begin.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Big Questions podcast, where we talk about love, death, sex, religion, and all the big questions worth asking. I'm your host, Robert K. Elder, and today we're talking with Sal Abbinanti. He's an art dealer and an artist, best known for the comic book Atomika. The Big Questions is sponsored by Shure, purveyors of professional microphones and headphones. You can check them out at shure.com. Sal, welcome.
How are you?
Hey, just fine.
Thanks for having me.
No,
My mother used to work at Shure.
Oh, really?
She worked in the cafeteria at Shure Brothers. Skokie.
I have to say, so many of these podcasts begin like with people telling me, like, "Oh, hey, they have some sort of story." So,
is Shure Brothers still the big microphone, or is it?
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge.
I remember her coming home complaining about. I guess she knew the guy, Mr. Shure, at the cafeteria. He was, cheapskate or whatever. But that was a million years ago. I don't know if he invented the microphone or what.
It's been around forever.
Still here in town? Or in
Skokie.
Skokie.
Yeah. But you talked a little bit before we turned the mics on about your mom, because you're having to sort of she's moving to a retirement community, but it's also put you face to face with your pack rat tendencies.
Yeah.
And so we're recording this in my studio, which is next to my house, which is put my own pack rat tendencies on display.
It's like the Fonzie apartment.
It is.
Yeah,
it is.
I'm so jealous.
Minus water.
Yeah.
But so moving your mom out, what did that make you realize?
It's just that awful time of your life that eventually is coming. That you have to almost do this quick rewind of your life, because she lived in the same house since 1961, 62 in the city, when you kept everything. Every waffle iron, every shopping cart. I found shopping carts in the basement that, when the shopping carts were real metal.
Yeah.
Remember when they were like, you could like kill somebody with them? And you just have to go through old phone bills and photographs and your grade school, report cards, and you don't know what to do with it all. You're like, well, do I throw it away? Am I heartless if I throw it away? I can't keep it. Your in-laws don't care about it. My brothers don't want it. And so you're the guy in Poland putting people on the train, deciding which train they go on and which train they don't go on, because you're having to make these horrible decisions of close family items to toss and keep. It's really, really hard.
Well, and I mean, is there, do you have sort of have you developed a philosophy about what stays and what goes?
Yeah, but you're reaching the point of it's like me telling you can only take 10 things out of this room, and you just don't have the room anymore. Nobody wants it, and you don't want to pay $500 a month for storage for stuff you don't even know what's in a box.
Yeah, and it's not worth $500.
It's not worth it. The coffee mug, from State Farm, and
but that's easy. But what happens to like correspondence? And in your case,
that's what I'm saying. Postcards, correspondence. I'm keeping it in boxes in my garage right now, but little by little, I'm letting it go.
Yeah.
I'm like Tom Hanks on the raft when he starts letting the logs go, and taking the raft apart little by little. You're losing hope. I'm losing hope at my mom's house. I'm letting it go.
But while you're quote unquote losing hope, are you also, I don't know, discovering something about the younger you? Or, I mean, that stuff must turn on a whole bunch of lights for old memories and that sort of stuff.
You find a lot of cool stuff from you. In some ways, I think we're at the age, we're both the same age, where we're constantly collecting pieces of our youth anyway, to remind us, why we started doing this. Because, you start to lose hope when you at a certain age of all that young exuberance and enthusiasm that you had starts to just get beaten out of you. You turn into that golfing pencil where there's nothing left. And then you find sketchbooks. Some of it's horrible. Some of it's kind of surprises you. You find pictures and letters, and you got to let it go, because, you you've gotten fat and you lose your hair and you've gotten.
But, by the way,
you look at pictures when you thought you were fat, and you thought you were horrible, and you look, oh my God, I thought I looked bad then. You should see me now.
Sal has a beautiful head of hair. Like I'm just saying. Like,
but
what are you complaining about?
But I've got breasts and I've got a stomach. You know, you can't go both ways. You lose your hair or you get breasts. I can't. You know, and breasts are genetic for men in my family. So.
So, you know, you are an artist, but also a comic book art dealer, most famously for Alex Ross. Who else do you represent?
Bill Sienkiewicz.
Bill Sienkiewicz.
Yeah. There were others, but the egos, a lot of artists are like 13-year-old girls. There's too many egos. You have to kind of, if one guy doesn't sell, he blames the other guy.
Yeah.
So I've repped other people in the past, and I find it's better to just, you know, trim it down. Because there's always going to be problems.
Well, tell me about just the comic book art industry in general. So, you know, it's huge, big business now. There are movies. But is there still a prejudice against comic book art or, you know, pop art versus real art? Or did Roy Lichtenstein just wipe that out? No,
well, it depends who you talk to. But I've had a problem. I've been trying to get Alex Ross is the main guy that I rep.
And for folks who don't know, he has this wonderful painterly style, very
Norman
realistic.
Rockwell is, he brought photorealism, primarily the main guy that brought photorealism to comics. And I've been trying to get him into galleries for years. And about 4 years ago, we did a huge exhibition, which is still traveling, with the Warhol Museum. And he's in a few museums in Paris and around the world. But most museums, even though you know, you've got Basquiat and you've got, like you said, Lichtenstein, and you've got a lot of artists that are pop oriented. They still frown upon comic art. I mean, even Sotheby's. When I first started working for Alex, we had the auction at Sotheby's for War on Crime for his Batman art, and it did tremendously well. And they haven't been back since. I mean, Sotheby's has very niche type market, but they're still worried that might tarnish. The guy at Sotheby's told me, he's like, oh, we do real artists. And I'm like, some of the greatest artists, you know, in my opinion, Americana, are comic artists. Yeah. And it's a push, but it depends who you talk to.
Yeah. Well, and can you break down just the economics of comics for artists? So the way I understand it, everybody has a page rate, and it goes from what to what. Just can you lay it out for?
Well, you generally it depends. There's pencilers. You could be a penciler where you conceive the art off of the script, and then you can get it production ready and hand it over to an inker who inks it and tightens it up, getting ready for production. Sure. But then there's other artists that do soup to nuts. Like Alex is an artist who lays it out, pencils it, paints it, and it's done. With the exception of the lettering. So over the years, page rates have gone anywhere from $15 to thousands of dollars, depending on the popularity of the artist.
But like, what's the median rate? So like
it depends.
Really?
It's sweatshop. At some places, it's still at sweatshop levels. There's still comic book companies that'll pay guys $30 a page, which, you know, considering it's a 22-page book. At the end, and that's a lot of work. 22 pages in a month is a lot of work. That's not a lot of money considering the work you're doing. So that's why a lot of companies have milled it out to Brazil and Philippines, and they do it overseas, and they do it in South America, where that kind of money, or the rates that come out of a studio, where it's almost like a conveyor belt, where you do a little and then you hand it off to the next guy. He does the backgrounds, and the next guy does.
It's like animation almost.
It's like animation, exactly. So here in the States now, your page rate is determined by your popularity, by what's going to move the needle and what's going to, like they say, follow the money.
Sure. Well, and Alex is on the high end of that. But again, just like, what's your average guy? So you're doing Spider-Man. Is it $100, $200
it could
a page?
Be, yeah, I would say an average B list artist is a few $100s a page. It could be anywhere from $250 to $500 a page.
Right, and then after that, you're just handing off the stuff for production, but you own the art, so you get to sell the art afterward, right?
If you're the primary artist, and you get 2/3 of the art, and then the inker gets the other third. If you're the sole artist, yeah, you get your art back. But you need to be firm and work that at and make sure that's very clear with the company ahead of time. Because some companies will play stupid and hang on to it.
Yeah, well, and that was the big fight for Marvel for years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was stories of people just walking out of the art vault with, you know, really expensive pages. In fact, I did a story a while back about Amazing Fantasy 15, which is the first appearance of Spider-Man.
Sure.
That I think is now at the National Archives.
Yeah.
But Steve Ditko, you know, remained angry about that stuff being stolen for years, and he told me, he's like, I could not care less.
Most artists then didn't. There was very little value on any of it. I've talked with production people that were there at the time, and they tore it in half. I mean, the dumpsters were full of art, literally torn in half. I've seen collections where I've seen some great collectors art on their walls that's literally
tape back together.
Taped back together. It was torn in half. I've talked to production people that would make the phone calls and say, "Hey, we've got your art," and the artists say, "Throw it in the garbage."
Yeah,
because there was no value on it. Now, it depends the timing of it, because later on it became whether you. I mean, when I first started doing shows back when Christ was a child. Christ was a child.
It's better the first way.
Christ was a child. There were artists would sit there, and there were stacks of art on their table for $5 to $20 was a high end, and it was stacked there like it was, you know, it wasn't protected. There was very little value put on it. It was dog-eared. The pencils were smeared. It was meant more as a souvenir. You kept it as just, hey, it's a little novelty item.
So, but when did that change? Because I can see the mentality, because you really think you're just the beginning of a production line.
Yeah. It started, I know eBay changed everything. eBay changed it in the sense that when I started working with Alex, there was a lot of, we seem to have hit that kind of interesting part of our lives, at least our generation who grew up with comics, when we got jobs and we had money and we had disposable income, which seemed to come, I would say, mid-90s, when the Renaissance, the Image, the indie guys came in, and there was a huge renaissance and a lot of speculative buying.
Yeah.
When the death of Superman, and it was all that, when you had people outside of comics buying comics with the idea they were going to bag and board them and make money on them, eBay came in and turned the comic market into an international market, when now you had guys from overseas, you had guys, comics are enormous in Europe.
Yeah.
For what Americans believe or don't believe of American comics being a legitimate art form, in Europe it's a full-blown art form.
Right.
I mean, in France, in Spain, in Italy, I do shows all over the world, and it's in Paris. There's a comic store on every corner, and in Japan and in Asia, it's revered. Only here, it's almost frowned upon. Like, you know, listen to the name; it's a comic book.
Yeah.
So people keep waiting for you to grow up. When you tell them you're in the comic business, or they think, you know, you smell like cheese and live in your mother's basement, which is, you know, offensive to me, but it's you know.
But it's also big money now, and you would know this better than I am, than I do. But like, what has some famous pieces gone for?
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
I mean, Alex's first auction that we did at Sotheby's, the Batman War on Crime. Batman over Gotham piece went for $67,000, but that just set, you know, the Dark Knight, Return of the Dark Knight cover just sold. It was in the New York Times, just sold for $500,000.
Yeah.
Covers regularly sell for six figures and on up, and you know, it's just because a lot of guys that have a lot of money, whether they're in Hollywood, whether they're on Wall Street, they grew up with comics and they want pieces of this around their office, whether they're keeping it as an investment, whether they're laundering their money. It's a variety of reasons why people buy art, but certain art has a return on investment type quality.
But I mean, is part of that because they're buying back their childhood?
I think it's a combination. I mean, I know collectors that buy it strictly as investments. They know what to buy, like a Frazetta or something, which is they're so rare, and Frazetta paintings hardly ever exist.
Yeah, Rodriguez owns most of them, right? Rodriguez,
most
the director?
Well, a lot of that I'm not. I mean, there are very few out them that are available. I know of a dozen or so that have circulated, but most of them are in the Frazetta Museum. A family retained them all. Huh. I mean, the main piece is Death Dealer, and a lot of those that are iconic. So, but you can get canvas prints of them and hang it on your wall, and I defy you to tell me the difference between the real and the canvas print. So.
What about you? Like, you talked about, surrounding yourself in your childhood and then this dilemma of what do you do? What pieces have you bought? It doesn't even have to be comic book art what's been important enough to you to go find it again?
I started with the black light posters.
Huh.
Growing up, I was a kid in the late 60s. I kind of caught the hippie, phenomenon when I was 5, 6 years old, and we had these bookstores around my house that had black light posters. And then Third Eye was a company that licensed Marvel characters, and they made about, I want to say, 26 to 32 Marvel black light posters. And I thought they were, seeing Jack Kirby in black light is like, doing acid without having to do acid. So those were the first things that I found on eBay. When eBay started to begin, I was like, no, they don't exist. But there's plenty of guys that found them in their attic, found them in their garage. So I framed them up, and that's the focal point of my office, are those black light posters.
Huh. How many do you have? Like, is it just
I would say about a dozen.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, and when you frame them up, they look nice. I don't do the whole light, and lay in the corner and listen to Iron Butterfly with them. But
I think you're missing a whole dimension.
I don't know. I know, but they just remind me of when I used to sit in my room and draw, just to draw.
Yeah.
There was no, beginning, middle, and end. But after that, when I started to have a little bit of money, Jack Kirby, I started to pick up just, pieces that inspired you. It didn't have to be, is it a key sequence? Is it Fantastic Four? Is it this? It was just, random stuff he did at DC, which it was powerful. The compositions in them were powerful. And if I was running out of my house, it was on fire, and I had to grab one or two, it would be those pieces. It wouldn't be like, oh, this or oh, that,
Right.
Based on value. It's more of, I think, the sentimental value you put on stuff.
Right, and Kirby had a long career. He co-created
Enormous.
He co-created half the Marvel universe.
I
and
would
more.
say, yeah. Without him, where would we be without him?
Yeah,
is the expression.
so Fantastic Four and
Hulk, Iron Man, the Avengers,
all that stuff.
I mean, Captain America. I mean, all of the Fourth World stuff at DC. I mean, he's hundreds and hundreds of characters.
And he has this sort of
Silver Surfer.
He has this sort of very interesting, like, blocky style, but really did the sort of pushing poses is what they call it, very sort of dynamic page layouts. But he was also a machine, like lived was it in Long Island and just chain smoked and did pages after page after page.
He was at his height. He did 5 issues a month, and at one time he did 6 issues a month. And that's superhuman. That's unheard of. He's from another planet, because to get an artist today to do a single issue a month is considered very, very good. And Jack Kirby was, and he, for most people, even though the newest generation doesn't seem to be as familiar with him as they should be, he's the greatest, in my opinion. I mean, I loved him. I mean, I loved Jack Kirby. I was a John Buscema fan, of Gene Cole, and I love the Silver Age of Marvel. But for me, there's Jack Kirby and everybody else.
Yeah. So you've been an artist, and then you've been an art dealer. So how did being on the other side, or being on either side, inform your life as an artist now that you see how things are sold? Like, what perspective did it add?
I think it makes you, like, the same. You probably know the answer as well as I do. Once you're on both sides, you tend to just break it down to its simplest form. You realize that as a writer, as an artist, as a dancer, as a musician, you really got to find the reason you wanted to do it at the beginning. You have to find this. You need a creative outlet. You have to have a reason to do it, because you really, it's part of who you are. Because the business end of it, the money end of it, that's all going to come and go. But if you're motivated solely by making money, you're never going to, I don't think you're ever going to excel in anything artistic, because in the end, you have to get to the board and clear all that crap out of your head, because there's a million reasons and a million people in the industry that'll stop you from doing what you want to do if you listen to them.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's tough, and as a writer, it's tough people will, to get out there and duke it out and put all the negativity aside and still accomplish what you want.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and part of that we were talking a little bit before is meeting your heroes. What are the dangers of meeting your heroes? You
got to learn, I think, to accept the art and not feel that they're going to be like your 8th grade art teacher. Some of them are grizzled guys that really just want to sign your book and want you to leave them alone.
Yeah.
Some of them aren't feeling particularly well that day. Some of them have huge egos. Some of them are just SOBs right out of the gate. So I think don't expect them to if you show them your work and you're going there, you might not like what you hear. You might be surprised that you're going to get an honest assessment of your work, not what your mother's going to give it to you. But I found, and then some of them could not be more generous with their time and their advice. And the best advice I've ever got from heroes of mine was always the simplest. It was that expect adversity, expect problems, expect failure, and that's part of the process. Not, hey, work on your perspective, hey, keep practicing, keep working. Because as an artist, there's no shortcut. You really just have to put the work in. And it's not like you can be a rapper, where you just, can be good at rhyming songs. It's like the old days. You got to learn how to play an instrument. And as an artist, there's really no faking it. If you don't practice and you don't know how to draw, it shows on the page.
Yeah.
There's no way, unless you're swiping, in which case they can catch you doing that too.
But what in meeting your heroes, how does that inform how you deal with people who like your work and ask you to sign books and want your opinion? I
think it's important to always be nice. I just don't see the point in, because youth just, all they need is enthusiasm. All they need is encouragement. All they need is self-confidence. And then with self-confidence, that's when you get your work done. That's when you sit down and you're not going to second guess everything you do. Because as an artist, you're already second guessing yourself. Yeah. Artists are that kid that has to look in the toilet before we flush it anyway. That's kind of who you are. It's indicative of, you got to see the creation, but
that's a very special way to put
that. No, you do. I mean, you've got this. The reason you became an artist was you needed to, you had this, you have to have a certain element of an ego. But when you meet your heroes, the best thing they could tell you is just keep at it. Keep at it. You'll be fine. It'll work out. Keep practicing. Not everything looks great, because that's what your family tells you.
Yeah.
Don't show your portfolio to your family. Show it to somebody who knows what the hell they're doing. And then you'll get especially when you want to make a living at it. If you just want to draw just as a hobby or just because you love to draw, or you want to meet girls in high school, hey, that's great. But the minute you say you want to approach an editor and you want to get paid, you better get ready to get it handed to you.
Yeah. Well, and one of the other things we sort of talked about a little bit is just this culture. So, the summer belongs to comic book movies.
Yeah.
It will.
The last 3 seem to have, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will, for a long time. I don't think we're in danger of burning out just because those things aren't movies anymore. They're sort of just ATM machines.
Yeah.
But I think that's also part of our culture. So Disney now owns Marvel.
Yep.
There's still some rights with the movies sort of tied up. Fantastic Four, the comic book, is going away, but I don't think it'll go away for that long.
Disney will settle it.
Yeah.
Disney's like the mafia. They'll figure it out.
Yeah. But it's I bring this up because I just saw
Spider-Man 2, selling by Sony.
Yeah. Or licensed, right? There's
licensed.
Some
the movie rights. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. But so complicated businessy stuff. But I want to get back around to Disney because you and I both have kids. How old are yours?
4 and 7.
4 and 7. Yeah. So and mine are 6. And we talked about Disneyland because I just saw your Facebook just explode with the Disney stuff. So how do you balance that? My wife is constantly trying to keep Disney princesses from invading our house.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so rough. It's frozen. Everything is frozen. It's like a cult.
Yeah.
That Elsa cult.
Yeah, my little girl is Elsa.
Oh
for Halloween.
Man, it's tough because I'm not one of those go on Oprah and complain about my childhood, but my father wouldn't take us to Disney World. It was seen as a big waste and a big, oh, it's for kids. And we were kids when he would say it. But I had that Depression era generation parents where, you know, if you went on a vacation, it was foolish. You just didn't go on vacations. It was a waste of money. But with my kids, you know, Disney is, I've gone to it a million times. Well, not a million times, but I've gone to it as an amusement park with my friends over the years, and it was just another amusement park. But when you go with your kids, it really is a special place. I have to say I've kind of gotten in line with when you could see your kids' enthusiasm and exuberance and just wet themselves over seeing Goofy. You know, you don't have that anymore. Those days are gone. You know, you're just kind of like, oh, okay. And you look at Goofy and he kind of gives you that nod, like, hi, you know, that I see through the mirror nod. But it's hard too, because my God, you can see the consumerism that they're trying to cultivate when they're there. They want to build they're creating a customer for the next 40 years when you're there, because everywhere you go, you're inundated with, you know, and God help you once you make your reservations, because now they send you emails and phone messages and Goofy calls your house, and it's almost like getting taken by a UFO and violated by aliens. It never stops, man. And I was just like, okay, this is cool, but when you get to Orlando, it's just like, wow, they've got you from the minute you walk in. They've got you from where you go eat to when they know your name when you get off the tram, and they send you the luggage tags, and you know, you're in, man. It's like Cousin Ostra. There's no getting out anymore. You burn the flowers and give blood right there.
But I don't know. Is there any sort of balancing, or do you have any, again, sort of long-term concern, or have you just given up? Like I'm sort of at this weird place where I'm like, my wife doesn't want them to have princess backpacks and whatnot. I'm just like, they're part of the culture they live in, and what are you gonna do?
I want them to be that, because I'm also of the school that I think they're gonna reach an age when they're gonna be too cool for it, and they're gonna be too cool for me, and they're gonna think of me as just that old guinea and not want to talk to, oh, my father, he's embarrassing me. And when I go visit them at college, they'll warn their roommates that, oh, here, my dad's coming over and he talks so much, and he looks like Ernest Borgnine and that kind of thing. So I'm afraid that, that day is going to come when, you know, there is no Santa Claus.
Yeah.
And they're just not going to be the young, and that youth, that exuberance and that innocence is just going to be gone. And so I'm like, let me soak it up now. So that way, when I'm sitting on the couch and you're like, hey, call your mother, I can look back and go, yeah, we did the Disney thing. Yeah. We got that out of our system. But I understand what your wife is saying, because when it starts, it's bad. You're like the wolf man. There's no going back. You know, it's over.
Well, and it's interesting, because I think what she's trying to do is she's trying to find some sort of balance. Like, she's trying to, Robert Crumb talked about this, about basically not being a billboard for corporations when you're, wearing logos and that sort of thing.
Sure.
But, again, do you want to raise them in the culture they're in, or are you trying to, so it's this constant struggle.
I think travel helps a lot. I think, I look forward to, I think what helped me a lot as the bourgeois American was when I started leaving the country. I mean, my biggest kick in the rear end was when I went to when I was in college. My roommate was from Brazil, and I went home with him once for a holiday, and I was shocked. I just couldn't believe, you think everything is the way it is here in the States, and we don't realize how rich we are. When people say, oh, come on, they think, I don't mean rich like in a rap video where you're throwing money up in the air and you got a Rolls Royce and you've got the swimming pool with the volcano and the waterfall. I'm talking about drinking water, food, you can call an ambulance, you've got electricity, you've got heat, you've got clothes on your back. When I went to South America, it was just like I couldn't believe the homelessness and the poverty. And so I think, and then you have compassion for other cultures when you see that, and you realize how when you go to Disney, okay, this is kind of excessive. I understand it, but you also need to know the way the real world is. And I think when you take your kids traveling, and especially out of the country, that'll help a lot. Hopefully, it grounds them a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So what else do you do to ground your kids? So travel. What else? What?
Well, with my kids, it's we started the Montessori school thing. I don't know if you did the.
No.
Yeah, that's crazy. They speak another language and they talk about me in front of me now because they just talk Japanese and I don't know what they're saying.
Yeah, my kids know more Spanish than I do.
No, my kids have turned into James Bond villains. They're and you hope that the multicultural thing also helps. But with my luck, they'll get a job in Asia and I'll never see them again. And they'll be...
It seems like you are mourning in advance a
No,
lot.
I see my brother's kids and I see they reach an age where they're too cool to talk to you and they're off doing their own thing and you never see them again. And I think in some ways that's good. You've done your job as a parent. They've become, adults that contribute to society instead of, smoking pot in the backseat of your car for the rest of their lives and never wanting to go out and work and do what they got to do. But on the other hand, it's like I had kids at an older age. I didn't get married till I was 40, so I nag them to come around and help me, find my Geritol, stuff like that.
But is some of that a reaction against the way that you were raised? Like, was there something consciously that you were like, okay, I want to do this differently?
You wanted to get out of the house. I mean, I grew up in a house with a lot of brothers and sisters, so I couldn't wait to get the hell out of there, and have, not have your stuff in your room constantly violated. And, I was lucky. I traveled a lot as a kid. I was on the road with Mayflower, so I got a chance to see the rest of the United States, and I thought, this is great, man. I couldn't wait to get out. So I kind of think that's what happens to kids too. They want to get out, but I don't know. My kids might be living at home when they're 40. Who knows?
And given your job, are comics cool to them, or are they not cool because it's something that Dad does?
I mean, the cool thing about comics in the United States, or as a medium, is that it's still one of the few things that gets kids to read. And so many things, especially I see my kids, the way they interact with the iPad, they turn into zombies where they're just looking at YouTube videos all day. With comics, it actually helped me, going to Chicago public schools. It helped me read a lot because I started to read comics. And I think a lot of countries understand that. When you go overseas, they have, at shows I do in France and in Italy and in Asia, they have kid days. They have an enormous amount of programs to bring kids to shows and give them free books. I mean, like we have here with Free Comic Book Day. Right. But much more because they understand. They realized how important that is to get kids to read and not just have the video game kind of mindset.
Well, and that's the other challenge for the comic book industry is like the median age for the average reader. I mean, is it over 30 now?
Yeah, it was well over 18 and 20, but that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So now, probably.
Yeah,
it's closer to 30. Yeah.
So I think they have that problem of like, how do you grow new fans, especially when like a new book, even for kids, is $3 or $4. Like that's rough.
And a lot of the it seems to me that DC with the 52 line, they were very clear that they were going in a darker direction. That a lot of companies wanted their books to go much darker, which offended a lot of the mainstream fans, but a lot of the mainstream fans also understood that this is the direction things were going to go.
Yeah,
I still live in the past. I still buy the stuff that I wind up buying Marvel Masterworks and old copies of stuff I read as a kid, and I keep up with what's going on to a large degree, but I don't know. A lot of times characters look like, I'm like, I don't even know who it is. I'll be like, oh, that's Hawkeye? I'm like, okay, well, it wasn't the guy I knew, but okay, it's Hawkeye.
Yeah.
It's still surreal to see this stuff you grew up with in the movies. I'll mention characters with my wife, and she has no idea who they are, and I'll be like, that character's been around since the 60s. And she'll be like, really? Iron Man was from the 60s? And they thought it was like, Robert Downey was like the first guy to play Iron Man.
But that was sort of brilliant because, he was Iron Man, kind of a C-level character.
Yeah, at best, sure.
Like low expectations.
Very low, yeah.
Came in and, he was not just the guy in the suit. Robert Downey made that character.
Yeah. It had a lot to do. Tony Stark in the comics was not a very interesting guy.
Yeah, until he became an alcoholic, and then it was
that's
like,
right.
What the heck?
Until he hit the bottle. He was always a womanizer. He always had, in fact, he always, ran around with the starlets, and and Black Widow in the earliest comics. But he was more just a billionaire playboy kind of guy.
Yeah, he was Bruce Wayne until Bruce Wayne plus more tech,
right?
But again, with a alcohol problem, and like that hasn't shown up a bunch. And I understand in the next round of Avengers and Iron Man and Captain America movies, they're bringing back Civil War, which is really interesting because they're going to pit the heroes against one another.
Yeah, I seen a little bit. I just was at New York Comic Con and they showed a little bit of the new Avengers movie with Ultron, and Spader does the voice of Ultron. It sounds very cool, and it looks very dark again. It looks again where they're pitting them against each other. They showed some of the Hulkbuster armor where Iron Man's going to fight the Hulk and that, and that's what the fans want. And these movies have been just a license to print money. It's been ridiculous, a lot of them, I think they were just kind of expecting and they weren't sure how they would do. But when Thor makes money, something's wrong. I mean, there's something going on, because I grew up loving Thor, but I never thought it would make any money as a movie.
No, and that's the other thing that I was telling my wife about is like, there's no reason that this character should work at all. No. But this is a kind of a great, fun, interesting movie.
I never thought that Hannibal Lecter would play Odin. It's
Well, but even so Marvel for years had if you looked at their business plan, they would say like we have 38,000 or however many characters we have. All of them are primed, and my response to that was like, no, you have like 100 that are really bankable. But then I'm proved totally wrong because Guardians of the Galaxy, which is the movie that no one asked for.
In a million years, if anybody told you that they thought that was going to make any money, you're crazy. And I knew people in the business that when they first saw the trailer, they thought, okay, here we go. This is going to be the downturn. This is the one that they pushed it. This is not going to, and it turned out to be like the highest grossing of the year, I think. For them. And it wasn't even the original Guardians of the Galaxy. It was the secondary. Cast that they invented, 20 years ago. I was just like, this is like with the raccoon. And everybody is in the business is kind of like, DC can't find a way to do the Justice League, but Marvel found a way to do Guardians of the Galaxy with a raccoon. So something's wrong. Something at Warner Brothers is amiss. I think they haven't been able to kind of put it together over there.
Well, they had the start though. I mean, they really started in 1978, 1979 with Superman.
That's still the gold standard. The Chris Reeve one is still what people consider the gold standard for Superman.
I think and again, please disagree. I think the best comic book movies have been the second X-Men, I think, because it's got all these amazing like sort of social overtones. Even the second Spider-Man, even though it's a little overlong,
the Chris Nolan stuff I liked a lot. I mean, there were some people that in the business. I know Frank Miller recently criticized it, saying he didn't get it.
The Dark Knight, and Batman Begins.
But the way Chris Nolan kind of balanced, real life locations with special effects, and I remember at the time when they cast Heath Ledger, people were just horrified. They thought there's no way this guy could. Like you said with Robert Downey, and he won an Oscar, and he was coming off Brokeback Mountain, and people were like, "Oh, come on, why would they do this?" And I think the Chris Nolan stuff, and I like what Scott Snyder did with Watchmen. I think it's a little long.
Zack Snyder.
Zack Snyder. I'm sorry. It's a little long, but I think it's ambitious.
I think it was great. And it solved the ending. Like people don't know this, but if you've not read the comic book, it's got a very problematic ending that people say was ripped off from The Outer Limits. It solves the ending. My only issue with it was you're not allowed to use Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah anymore. Like it's just been too overused.
I have to say I remember they used it in that Basquiat movie with
Jeffrey
and was it David Bowie that played Warhol in that movie? In the same way, the last 20 minutes of the movie they play Hallelujah. You're just like, guys,
and Shrek and like no more.
That's right.
No more Hallelujah.
I think there ought to be. We should have like a city ordinance that they're not allowed to play it anymore.
No, see, I love the Watchmen. And I thought, again, the movie was almost slave-like to the source material. But
shot for shot in some cases.
Yeah. But I kind of like that. I just didn't think they got some of the casting right. Like that guy is not old enough to play that guy.
Yeah, I thought Gerard Butler was on board to play the comedian originally, and he didn't have time because he had to make a movie. You know, he had to do Jennifer Aniston movies. Someone needs to talk to this guy about his career choice from the guy in 300 to the guy who's making these soft comedies with Jennifer Aniston.
But he's been around forever. I just saw he was on, I don't know if you remember the Michael Crichton movie Timeline? He's one of the main characters.
Okay.
Like I totally forgot. So he's been around forever. He's only just bubbled to the top recently.
I think he's his career, he needs to, you know. I thought he was going to go, I thought after 300 it was great. He was going to go on and do more superhero movies, and then he went the other way, and now he's doing cologne commercials. So
Sal, in closing here, so what is the future then? So you have Disney consolidating not only Marvel, but they own the Muppets. Warner Brothers is figuring out
so much stuff. They own the Muppets. They own all the Star Wars stuff. They own all the Lucas library.
That's Indiana, including Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones.
People forget about that.
And I don't know how much of that is. They're going to start incorporating. They've announced they're going to start the Star Wars comics back up at Marvel again in the beginning of the new year. It's an interesting period because you got to remember that the comics were. There was a death rattle for comics in the 70s, and then they came back strong. And the Star Wars comics kind of saved Marvel in the 70s, and then they had the huge Image resurgence in the 90s. I mean, you remember when they were selling, Spawn and
millions
of copies. Yeah, Death of Superman. And then it kind of went flat again, and Marvel, people forget Marvel went bankrupt for a long time when they were bought, and that's when they had to sell off piecemeal some of their movie stuff.
That's
when they sold Sony Spider-Man.
That's when you ended up with Blade being the first movie.
Yeah, and people forget but people forget how in trouble they were. They were, and then the Tim Burton movie, the Batman movie with Michael Keaton, people forget how successful that whole franchise was. But it's an interesting time because it's become very corporate. And Marvel, I mean, DC has moved their office. All the offices by next year will be in California, and none of them in New York anymore, at least for Marvel editorial. I'm sorry, DC editorial. And then Marvel, same way as Disney. And they've got an enormous push behind them to kind of start crossing things over, where Disney has a lot of ability with their media empire to kind of push comics with the gaming element and the online stuff and products in the park and the promotion ability through their movie companies. So like Warner Brothers discovered with the DC, when Warner Brothers obtained the DC, franchise or the DC copyright material, which is all the characters, they discovered that the real value of these companies is all the copyrights, is all the characters. Because let's face it, these characters are going to be around long after we're gone.
Yeah, licensing alone.
I mean, and there was a rumor, I remember a year ago, that Disney was going to try to buy the DC license, the DC characters, which was like crazy, but hey, never say never, because if you would have told me 5 years ago Disney would buy Marvel,
for me, Star Wars was the bigger, like, really?
Yeah, was it $4 billion or $4.5 billion?
Yeah, huge.
And I kind of saw that coming, I think, a little bit when George Lucas just didn't want to have to police it anymore.
Yeah,
because there was so much of the keeper of the flame with all those characters. But it's an interesting time. I mean, there's a lot of people in the business that seem to think it's bad when you've got big companies owning these, but they seem to have kind of left them alone for the most part right now, where there were all these rumors when Disney first took over of what they were going to do to the licenses and what they were going to do to the characters. And I don't know, they seem to have left it alone enough.
They seem to have been good stewards.
Yeah, that they haven't really gone in and made any wholesale changes that have squashed things. Yeah. I think the movies and the crazy amount of licensing that's been going on is scaring some people. But if you would have told me I would ever see the Destroyer in a movie, as a Thor villain 20 years ago, I would have told you were crazy. It's just, and what Bryan Singer's doing with the X-Men franchise, I think is terrific. And Guardians I haven't seen yet, but I've heard great things about it. Yeah. it'll be interesting to see, you know, when Warner Bros. Now that Marvel has really raised the bar with the Avengers, when you've got $1 billion franchise, the Avengers, what they're going to do with the Justice League. I think Justice League is either going to really, really bomb, or it's going to hopefully raise the bar where they're going to have to go neck and neck.
Yeah.
You know,
well, I just hope it's fun. Like, that's the other thing is, like, those movies are so serious. I was not a fan of the last of Man of Steel. It just seems not a lot of fun, and it does not have to be 1960s Batman, but you have to have some levity.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, I understand. That's kind of there's that balance where there's some people that approach the comic movies and think, yeah, it's okay to, you know, have the jokes here and there, have the humor element attached, kind of like what they do with the Avengers. But there's a large degree of improvisation too that they let Robert Downey have with the scripts, and they let them have over at Marvel. That it started right out of the gate with problems when they cast Ben Affleck. Everybody seemed to be horrified, but Ben Affleck, yeah, Daredevil is a great example of, wow, what were they thinking with Daredevil? But he's turned into a top flight director, Affleck, in my opinion. And I was not a fan, you know, going into, but with The Town and with Argo and that. But I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I've learned that you have to wait and see, because I've seen trailers that looked horrible, like the Guardians trailer. People were laughing in the theater.
Yeah.
I mean, not in a good way. They were laughing in an uncomfortable way, like, wow, this is going to be bad. And then who knows? So I've learned even with the trailers, you got to wait and see. You really got to kind of see where they're headed, and hope that they don't, like Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds. I mean, along with Hallelujah, they shouldn't let Ryan Reynolds in another one of these movies.
New Deadpool movie coming up.
Is he really?
I don't know if he's going to be in it, but he played Deadpool once.
Yeah, I know Luke Cage. You know, I hope they find a spot for that Idris Elba guy in the Marvel Universe, other than Heimdall and Thor. But the rumor Stan let slip is Black Panther is being made into a film. They're fast tracking Black Panther, so.
So we can talk forever.
I hope we didn't get into an area we started alienating, where they started dropping off on you, start going, I don't know what he's talking about.
No, I just think pop culture now, comic book culture is mainstream culture. It is the absolute.
Well, it's our generation too.
Yeah.
I mean, look who's the guys at the grocery store. Look who's making the decisions in terms of what you're buying for their kids. But then they also say that what's the movie going audience? 18 to 25 is their biggest core group at the theaters. Yeah. I think so. They'll buy tickets to anything. I mean, we bought tickets to Porky's. So.
Underage.
You
bought it for Firefox, but went to Porky's.
16 candles, and when John Hughes, the John Hughes generation, where Ducky got the girl at the end. It's like, not in my high school. Ducky didn't get the girl. Ducky got chased home.
All right, so thanks again. You've been listening to Robert K. Elder and Sal Abbinanti. Our music is by Hernan Sanchez. Sal, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.